Seeing teenagers commit such horrible acts and then receive life sentences at such a young age is frightening on so many levels. The stories that follow relate the tale of 4 young adolescent killers who had crazy reactions after receiving life sentences. Dante Wright. High school football player from Ann Arbor, Michigan, Jordan Klee, was well liked. He still had the rest of his life to live. The community was shocked when he was discovered dead in October 2016. He was shot and killed while he was supposed to be in class at Pioneer High School that day. A young man by the name of Dante Wright murdered him. He had attempted to rob Jordan with the assistance of 2 other males. After Jordan died, the robbery was over. The neighborhood was in desperate need of explanations, and Dante himself ultimately provided them. A pre-trial hearing was scheduled for Dante Wright in this case, but instead of doing so, he confessed to trying to rob Jordan at gunpoint with 2 of his friends. Dante gave a cool, clear response to the lawyer's inquiries. Jordan's distraught mother was in court wiping away tears as she sat close to her son's murderer. Near his house, Jordan passed away at an apartment complex. An employee in maintenance found his body. Dante never seemed sincere in his remorse during the entire legal process. He didn't even appear to be troubled by the knowledge that, as a result of what he confessed, he would probably spend the majority of his life in prison. In an effort to perhaps persuade the judge to be lenient, he didn't even make an effort to be respectful. He even grinned as his sentence was being read out loud. It's logical to assume that the judge presiding over the case took action to discipline him after becoming aware of his disrespectful actions. While Jordan's mother delivered her victim impact statement and expressed her sorrow over the loss of her son, Dante Wright, who was being sentenced for murder, had nothing but a pleasant and happy smile on his face. Karen Klee, Jordan's mother, asked Courtney Klee to read Jordan's victim impact statement in court since Karen was too emotional to do so. Courtney made an effort to maintain her strength and calm. Karen dries her tears while Dante reads this declaration, appearing unapologetic the entire time. Once given the opportunity to address the court and the victim's family, Dante does not express regret or remorse. The judge overseeing this case was utterly frustrated. As more details regarding Jordan's identity emerged, the case grew progressively stranger. Jordan's family decided against proceeding with the trial and instead preferred to adhere to the original sentencing in order to put this entire horrible experience behind them. In court, Dante's lawyer expressed regret on his behalf. Dante was given a prison term of 23 to 50 years for second-degree murder and armed robbery. Frenetia Torres. This is the tale of Frenetia Torres, a 17-year-old. A 21-year-old man called William Tunches was murdered by Frenetia, 17-year-old Nicholas Evans, and 18-year-old Khalil Miller. How did they manage it? She promised intimate relations. William had a crush on Frenetia, and Nicholas and Khalil planned to take advantage of it. They informed him that Frenetia would sleep with him provided he gave them $300 and told him to arrive in a wooden location in a suburb in Atlanta, and he agreed. Nicholas pointed a revolver at William when he arrived at the designated spot, and Khalil hit him over the head with a stick. William struggled to get his hands on the gun, and Khalil repeatedly struck him in the head. The gun fired during the argument and struck William. The 3 teenagers stole William's belongings before fleeing the scene. Later, Khalil made sure William was dead. The next day, William's body was being found. Police first had no idea who William was or why they had done this to him. William was ultimately identified by police, who then pieced together what had occurred. All 3 teenagers were arrested after being seen together at the crime scene. Khalil and Nicholas both admitted what they did and were accused of aggravated assault, armed robbery, and criminal homicide. As William had not been physically wounded by Frenetia, she chose to remain silent, possibly thinking that her charges would be less severe than those of the 2 other teenagers. When her allegations were read out loud in court, her amazement was obvious. Frenetia's wide eyes were filled with amazement and confusion as she shook her head. After being charged with a second armed robbery, Khalil appeared puzzled while Nicholas merely maintained his expressionless composure. Not only were Frenetia, Nicholas, and Khalil found guilty of killing William, but they were also linked to a number of previous robberies in the area, including one that took place only 5 days prior to Williams' passing. It's safe to say that they were all facing lengthy prison sentences. Khalil is in the worst possible situation now that he is an adult in law. The 3 teenagers were being held without bond at the local jail. One of the most bizarre aspects of this case is that it occurred in 2018, but there hasn't been any public discussion of it. To explain why these people have not yet been put on trial after all this time, there must be a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. But each of them is dealing with significant allegations that might result in a lengthy prison sentence. Martis Fuller. Kaylee Juga, who was 15 at the time, and her mother Stephanie Huga had been organizing a camping trip for the whole family. But regrettably, the trip was never executed. Kaylee, who had broken up with her boyfriend Martis Fuller weeks earlier, was in her room listening to music when the tragedy happened. Fuller accuses Kaylee of being the cause of his problems after she got him kicked out of school and off the football team. He sneaked into Kaylee's room on May 9, 2019 carrying a weapon. Fuller was a frequent visitor to the home and was familiar with it. Fuller, a 15-year-old, entered Kaylee's room and then shot her 5 times. Fuller then turned on her mother, shot her twice, and escaped while she walked outside to investigate after hearing gunshots. Thankfully, she survived. Fuller was arrested soon after and accused of burglary, murder, and attempted murder. He maintained his innocence throughout the trial, despite the fact that officials discovered the gun he handed a relative to get rid of matched the one used in the crime. Despite the fact that Kaylee's mom saw him and reported what she saw, later when speaking about losing her kid, she started to cry. When Fuller was given the chance to speak in court, he insisted that he was innocent and accused the media of casting him in a negative light. Here's a letter written by him that was read out by his attorney. As the judge read down Fuller's sentence, life in jail without the possibility of parole, he displayed no sign of remorse. Shondell Jackson. The University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Nathan Potter, a 21-year-old bright film student, had most likely made preparations for life's course following graduation. But fate had some other plans. Nevertheless, Shondell Jackson, a 19-year-old, and his accomplices' plans did not pan out. On that fatal day, 20-year-old Derek Thomas stopped Potter as he was making his way to his apartment, grabbed him, and declared him a fine target for robbery. While Jackson robbed Potter, Thomas was meant to be the watchman, but the robbery failed. When Potter didn't have any money, Jackson killed him by shooting him in the chest, then fled. Police eventually discovered them, apprehended them, and charged them with killing Potter after getting a tip from Jackson's uncle. They didn't stay concealed for long. Jackson carried himself carefree throughout the trial, and the relatives of his victim saw him smiling and mouthing profanities as he was brought out the courthouse. In her testimony before the court, Jackson's mother admitted hearing the news, but she contended that her son wasn't a monster. When County Circuit Judge Rebecca Dalit gave Jackson a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 1 count of felony murder, Jackson's demeanor turned violent. He cursed the judge, so court officers had to wrestle him to the ground, pepper spray him, and restrain him. What we just saw is very upsetting and depressing. How could someone have such a response after doing such a crime? Is it right what happened to them while they were so young? Let us know in the comments.